Hey everyone, I'm Andrew. If that doesn't mean anything to you, I explain a bit more about who I am and my co-host for this video and the co-host of the Thinking Poker podcast, Nate Meyvis, at the beginning of the video proper. I'm here just for a second right now to remind you the reason that this video exists. It was part of a fundraising campaign for the Bay Area Urban Debate League. So this is the donation page. If you're curious to know more about it, I'll have a clickable link here so you can contribute or just find out more about the organization by clicking there. But this is an organization that I'm involved with. I'm a member of the board of directors. In fact, I was a debater myself. I think it was an activity that did quite a bit for me, and I've seen it do quite a bit for some young people who would benefit from an enriching academic activity. And so this video was made as part of a fundraising campaign. For every $500 raised, I'm making 1 hour free poker strategy content. And as you can see, I've been quite successful. $3,500, more than $3,500 raised, with still 1 day to go as of the time of this recording. So I guess there's a chance I may be able to hit 4,000. And I've also had some people mail in checks. So I've got quite a lot of videos to put out there. And one of the things that I did was I tapped into some footage that I already had recorded. So this is something that Nate Meyvis and I recorded together, the first two parts of this series. I'm going to be releasing 3 videos that are all reviewing a Pot Limit Omaha 8 or better tournament that I played, all of them along with Nate. The first 2 parts we reviewed a while ago, not knowing it was going to be part of this campaign, but I needed some additional footage for this campaign. Nate was nice enough to let me use it for this purpose, so that's going to be some of the free content that you're getting. And then part 3 we did record just recently. If you enjoy this video, particularly, well, I'll leave that part out. If you enjoy this video, I would encourage you to make a donation to the Bay Area Urban Debate League. It can be as small or as large as you like. If you contribute before December 31st, 2015, which I realize is not giving you a lot of time from the time when this is published, but if you make your contribution in that time, 2 good things will happen. The first is that your contribution will be matched. We have a major donor who is matching all donations made to this campaign, so not just from myself, but as you can see, there's a number of other people from the organization who are raising money here as well. And so all those donations are going to be matched, all the ones made in 2015. And you also will be entered, if you donate at least $10, you'll be entered into a drawing to win some cool prizes, including premium Thinking Poker podcasts, custom video that I will make for you based on hands that you yourself played and based on your particular needs, a free month's membership to Tournament Poker Edge, which is the training site where I am a member. And so that will all be good things that will happen if you donate at least $10 before December 31st, 2015. However, you will be welcome to donate at any time. I believe the CrowdRise page is going to stay up. If it doesn't, you can also donate at www.baudl.org. That stands for Bay Area Urban Debate League. They've got a donate page there as well, and you can always contribute. If you find this video helpful, I will encourage you to do so. It's for a good cause, and it's the reason that this video exists in the first place. All right, so thanks for watching. I'll put up a link again at the end of the video, but for now, just enjoy. Hello, this is Andrew Brokos, and I have got a special treat for you today. I am here with
Hi,
Nate
how are you?
Meyvis. Hi, Nate. For those who don't know, Nate is the co-host, along with me, of the Thinking Poker podcast, and he knows a lot more about Pot Limit Omaha 8 or better than I do. So I thought he would be a good addition for reviewing this PL8 hand history.
Thanks for bringing me along, Andrew.
No, thank you. I intend to get a lot more out of
Sounds
this.
good. I've played a lot of split pot games in my life, and PL8 is one of my favorites.
So we do want to make clear, neither of us are expert PL8 players. I have largely recreational experience. I went deep in a WSOP event a couple of years ago, and I play the PL8 events when they come around. I've studied the game a little bit. I've talked about it with Nate, but I know even less about this than Nate does, and I think I'll let you describe your own.
Sure, I've played a ton and a half of PL8, but largely in tournament and single form. And although I have played cash games, a lot of the a lot of the plays I make are specific to a player pool. So I would say I'm very experienced. I've got some live experience, some online experience, and sit and go multi-table tournament and cash game experience. That said, some of that experience is a little bit old, and in a lot of it, although I've studied the fundamentals, I haven't. I've been more concerned with making exploitive plays and with sort of reading my opponents than I have with developing the sort of general expertise at a level that, like, say, you would need to beat a Hold'em game these days.
We're telling you all this just so you have an idea of what you should and should not expect from this video. So if you are already a successful competitive PL8 player, hopefully you'll enjoy watching this. Hopefully you'll pick up one or two things from it, but you may also notice a few things that you're like, I think you guys might be a little off about that. If you have no experience with the game or very limited experience with the game, I think that Nate and I will be pretty good people to learn from. I know that Nate has a pretty solid theoretical understanding of the game, and I think that we're both pretty good at explaining these concepts in a way that people who are not already familiar with the game will be able to pick up on. So I hope that you'll find this a helpful introduction and or an entertaining video. I would not expect that you're going to watch this single video and understand, or this single series and understand everything that there is to know about PL8, but it's a great game. Nate and I both really enjoy playing it, and I think that there's some interesting things that learning just a little bit about PL8 can help you with outside of PL8 with your no limit game or with any other game.
Yeah, it's a good club to have in your bag too, so to speak. If you're good at game selection, there's money in the game. It's spread in some live casinos, in a few all around the country. Some of the U.S. facing sites these days have PL8 games. Some of the non-U.S. facing sites have PL8 games, and it's generally, once you get beyond Hold'em, it's one of the more likely games that you can find, and a good poker sense combined with some game-specific understanding can really add to your bottom line as a poker player.
Do you think it's fair to say that the potential edge in this game is larger than what you would get?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very immature game, and this is a good example of what you're talking about. From like the theoretical answer to your question, like the is something that's hard to say, but from a practical point of view, I can tell you that a lot of the games play at roughly the level of sophistication that a Hold'em game played in 2004, and so if you're really good, you can really beat the snot out of those players. So yeah, a good player can do well, and oftentimes the variance is not so bad because you're getting anywhere from a quarter to 100% of the pot. So the swings can be not very bad. Against great players, your swings will be much worse. But in a good beatable game, it's a good way to have a good win rate without such severe downswings.
Well, and this brings us to a real important point about really any split pot game, but I think especially big bet split pot games, which is the importance of playing to scoop, meaning you're playing hands primarily that have the potential to win the entire pot. Even though the game is called high-low split, your goal is not to split the pot. Your goal is to win the entire pot. Now, that's easier said than done, especially because your opponents will ideally also be trying to win the entire pot. So many times you'll only end up getting half, but you want to be playing hands that have the potential to scoop, meaning the potential to win both the high and the low. And one of the nice things about that is that sorry, I have a truck driving by outside. One of the nice things about that is that very often you will escape, even if you run into a very strong hand. If you have a good high and a good low, it's going to be difficult for you to be beat both ways, and you will often escape with a portion of the pot. So the big sucker move in this game, akin maybe to stacking off for 200 big blinds with top pair and a bad kicker in no limit. The big sucker move here is putting in a bunch of money with a one-way hand, especially a non-nut one-way hand or a one-way hand that's the nuts but doesn't have any redraws in that direction, and no chance of winning the other.
Yeah, that's right. So everything Andrew just said is correct, and when you're thinking about starting hands to play, you want to be thinking about hands that go both ways. Those are your premier hands. I will add that there are two overlooked ways to win the whole pot. You do want to win the whole pot at this game, and the clear way to do that is to make a hand that wins both high and low. There are two underrated ways to do that. Number one is making the other guy fold, and you can do that if you play in position and if you recognize which boards are good for applying some pressure. And the other way to win the whole pot is to make a high hand when there's no qualifying low. So a hand like King, Queen, Jack 10, which is a one-way hand. Some of the boards that hand hits very hard, those are boards where there won't be a low possible. And you shouldn't overvalue high hands, but you shouldn't undervalue them either. And in particular, those are hands that get underrated by some otherwise competent players, or the high-only hands.
We'll have some opportunities to see specific examples of this, and you'll see how we kind of assess starting hands and situations as we go along. Is there anything else, Nate, that you think we should spell out up front before we get into the action?
I don't think so.
Okay, so let's do it, and obviously maybe some more things will occur to us as we play. So this is the $300 6 max PL08 W Coup event, World Championship of Online Poker on PokerStars. This is a hand. I'm pretty sure I folded this. Do you agree with that fold? Well, let's make sure I did first.
Yeah, I think it's a good fold. It's a good example of, it's a hand that goes both ways. You can make a bad flush, a bad straight, bad two pair, or a bad low. So that's so you do have a two-way hand, but out of position that deep, you're going to run into trouble a lot. If you have good control over your opponent, and specifically if this is an opponent who's not going to put the right kind of pressure on you with his nut one-way hands or his sort of marginal two-way hands, if this is somebody who's overly showdown bound, then you can get away with making this call. And and that would be even more true if he had made it 40 instead of 61. I see players bringing some hold'em habits over into Problem at Omaha 8 or better and min-raising a lot. But against an unknown opponent, very deep, that's important. And for over a 3x, almost exactly a 3x raise, I would fold this hand. You can call this a trap hand.
Yeah, I think this is a good thing to consider, especially if people have some experience with fixed limit Omaha 8 or better. Because this is a big bet game, it's not quite as big as no limit Omaha 8 or better, which you could also play and is part of, for instance, the W Coup. But this is a big bet game, and the pot has the potential to get quite large, and there's a possibility for you to face big bets on later streets. So, having you want to have the opportunity to make near nut hands that are going to feel pretty comfortable calling big bets or be able to value bet when you make them. And as you said, Nate, this is the kind of hand where you're very rarely going to make a nut sort of hand. A lot of times, you're like, even a decent flop for you still mostly just have bluff catchers in both directions. It's rare that you have a hand strong enough to value bet as a result of playing this. I think calling here might be somewhat akin to calling with a hand like 8-4 suited or something out of the big blind. Like every once in a while you'll flop really well, but most of the time you're just going to have a kind of marginal hand at best. So here it folds around to me to the small blind, and I open completed. I'm not sure that this is correct, but one thing that I remember you telling me when I was playing the W Coup event is how close in equity a lot of PL08 hands run to each other. So I feel like, and I do happen to know actually the player in the big blind is, I don't know how much Omaha experience, if any, he has, but he is a pretty good, aggressive, I imagine, professional. I've played with him at mid to high stakes, no limit cash games before, and run into him in tournaments and stuff. So I think he's going to have at least a decent theoretical understanding of the game. But my inclination is to open limp pretty wide here from the small blind. I don't know how many hands I would be open folding. Do you think this?
Yeah, I wouldn't fold against somebody who's going to be a little too passive and might give it up pre-flop a little too much. I would rather raise, try to take it down, or build a pot that you think won't be too hotly contested after the flop. But here, I would definitely just complete against the player you described. If you get raised, I think it's close. Either calling or folding is fine. It has some obvious defects, this hand. It's going to make a lot of not nut hands. That said, you're in a blind battle. You can make a set, a straight. You can make some sort of passable low. In this situation, it's certainly worth 10 more chips.
Right. As in hold'em, making non-nut hands is a little bit more acceptable in blind battles because it's going to be harder for your opponent to make the nuts as well. So I end up getting a flop, which is not very favorable for me. There are a couple of decent turn cards, specifically a deuce or a six would be good for me, but I chose not to even try to fire at this. I think I kind of see him floating with like any spade draw, any gut shot. I definitely don't think he's going to fold a king or a queen, and I have a very little chance of winning the pot if I bet and get called. So I didn't really see a case even for trying to
That's right. You like the four, but it's not so easy to construct a hand that doesn't have any piece of this board. It's either he's got some sort of backdoor draw, or he's got a pair or something, and I don't see him giving up too much. I mean, if you think he's 10 tabling and he'll just give up easily, then you might put out a min bet. But other than that, I will say that some sort of low draw will happen a lot, and getting an ace deuce 6 or 7, which will give you a gutter, will also happen quite a bit. Sometimes you hit a 3. Good things can happen. Like if you were in the big blind here and the other person bet 20, I might call and take the turn in position and see what happens. But yeah, it's not a good hand. You didn't hit a good flop. Check folding is the play, I think.
So this one strikes me as certainly a good enough hand to open on the button. It would be a really premium hand if this king were an ace instead. So not having an ace definitely hurts your low potential. And so if there's an ace on the board, then I'm not going to have much chance of winning the high because of my, even a pair of kings would be unlikely to give me the best high hand if there's an ace on the board, but I'll have a strong low, right? Deuce 3, deuce 4, 3, 4, all have nut making potential when there's an ace on the board. If there's not an ace on the board, my low is not so good, but I have a better chance of picking up the high by making a pair of kings or just potentially betting it and getting to my opponent to fold. So this seems to me a hand that has slightly non-premium high and low potential, but given that I have an opportunity to steal from the button, it's a hand that I might or might not play from other positions, but it seemed like I do want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time. I would also, something that I think I do differently from what other players do is I would also call a 3-bet with this hand in position, especially this deep. So you're right that this hand has defects. The ace, lacking an ace means that it'll be harder to make a nut low. And one thing that I think you would also agree with is that it makes your flush much worse if it's not the nut flush. With 4 cards in your opponent's hands, you're going to run up against the nuts a lot more than you would in Hold'em. And even in Hold'em, this is something we've discussed in other media before. A lot more flushes are nut or near nut flushes than a lot of non-combinatorially inclined players think there are. So the king high flush has value, but not nearly as much value as an ace high flush. That said, 3 wheel cards, that's a very good thing. The deuce 3-4 really helps. If you get paired, then it's very hard to get counterfeited without making either a 2-pair or trips or a backup low draw. It has a lot going for it. So it's a two-way hand. You're nice and deep. This deep, you want to think about making the nuts, and a hand with 3 consecutive wheel cards or 3 wheel cards at all, that's going to make the nuts pretty often, or often enough to make it worth your while. The flush helps, the king helps a little bit, and you can pot control and value bet aggressively when you need to. So folding would be very poor here. I would raise.
Don't think there's much of a case for playing that
Heck
from
no.
the position.
Nope.
Or that. This strikes me as another one of those trap kind of hands where you can look at it, you can say, well, I've got a little bit of nut making potential with the deuce 3. If there's an ace on the board, I'll have a nut low draw, and I've got some flush potential. 10-7 could make a straight. I mean, if you tug at it enough, almost any hand can start to look playable. But I think if you kind of break your Omaha hands down into collections of 2 cards each, so deuce 3 is pretty good. 7-3 and 7 deuce is not entirely worthless because every once in a while if there's like an ace deuce or an ace 3 on the board, being able to make a low is you kind of have a backup. So the 7 deuce and 7-3 is like okay. The 10-7 is not a particularly useful combination, but it has a little bit of potential to make a straight. But then you've got 10 deuce offsuit, 10-3 offsuit, those are just completely worthless hands. So what we really have is a single premium 2-card hand, a couple of kind of marginal 2-card hands, and then a couple of worthless 2-card hands. And if we assume this player opening from the cutoff probably has something like 4 to 6, premium 2-card hands, our hand starts to not look.
Yeah, I would fold here. Calling isn't terrible just because you will make the nuts one way some of the time. Having the third club has a little bit of value in that when you make a flush, it's a little bit harder to get over flushed, but it's a bad hand. If you do, this is a pot odds call because you think your playing disadvantage won't be too severe after the flop, and my standard play here is certainly to fold.
Great. And that actually was a good example. I mean, the flop was king 7 deuce, so I flop bottom pair without a low draw, and that's a great example of a hand that you, even though it seems like an above average flop for you, so I've got 2 pair. The truth is, like, bottom 2 pair is not a particularly good high hand in Omaha game. It's a bit better in 08 than it is in Omaha high only, but not having any kind of low potential and just having bottom 2 pair, it's still not really a hand that you're going to have a lot of option for continuing with, and there's a flush draw on the board that you don't have, etc. I don't see a case.
I would probably open it from the button just because I like to open a lot in button.
Oh yeah, sorry. I mean.
No. That's right.
Yeah, honestly, I might even have folded it from the button, but that's just because I don't feel as confident in my game.
Yeah, it's it's a one-way hand, but you'll make an emergency low sometimes. You'll make a straight or 2 good pair. It's not a good hand, but it's a steal. It's like stealing with ace 3 offsuit or something.
Okay. Do you think I'm making a mistake?
No, I don't. I'll throw in a 3-bet sometimes with that hand, especially this deep. It's not good. It's you've got a lot of pretty mediocre possibilities here. That said, if you're against opponents you have good control over, you will make very strong hands. Sometimes you'll make nut hands one way that you can really push, and a lot of the boards on which you'll make nut hands are boards on which they'll have things like a pair of aces or 2 pair that you can really put pressure on. So this is not a bad hand to sometimes put in like the light part of a 3-betting range against opponents you really want to punish, but I would not advocate this as a standard part of a 3-betting range. I would say it's a light open from the cutoff, but an open that I would make, and it's an aggressive, very light 3-bet that I would also make sometimes. But standardly, especially probably if you're listening to this and are not a very experienced 08 player, I certainly default to a fold.
Yeah, I think it takes some experience to mix it up with a hand like this. I think if you're just starting out, you're going to have a lot of tough decisions with the hand.
Oh, he would have made trips there though. So
10, 10, 9, 6. This is the 10s and 9s in particular are pretty poor in this game. So you might think, well, I've got some nut making potential here with 10, 9 and the 6 as well. So if there's, say, 6, 7, 8 or 7, 8, 9 on the board, I can make a straight. And that's true. The thing is, when there's 6, 7, 8 on the board, and frequently when there's 7, 8, 9 on the board, there's going to be a low out there as well. So if it's 6, 7, 8, it's almost certain that someone else is going to have a low. And 7, 8, 9, you just need one more low card out there, and then someone else is going to have a low, and you have no potential to make a low with this hand. So, and kind of a lot of the best case scenarios for you where you do end up making a straight, somebody else makes a low, and you only get half of the pot anyway.
And even if you do flop a set, there's an old saw, or there's an old fact. There's a well-known fact that 3 jacks can never be the nuts at the river. 3 queens is the worst hand that can be the nuts at the river. So it's not to say that you should always worry about monsters under the bed when you have 3 10s, but it does mean that you're never going to have the nuts. And similarly, you only have 2 cards for the straight. You don't have a lot of wrap potential, so you cannot possibly make a low with that hand. So it's a one-way hand. It's certainly a trap hand.
So I was feeling pretty good about this hand facing a single raise. Now, when there's a 3-bet from the small blind, this kind of shriveled in my eyes.
Yeah, that's a premium hand. I would call. It's it's having position this deep, having position against the 3-better is so good. You don't want to get 4-bet that would set you up for a gross situation, but I think that won't happen too often. I think what'll happen very often is Evnami will just call and take his price, or he'll fold if he has a reverse implied odds kind of hand. Yeah, Ace Jack 10, it makes the nuts or nut draws a lot. You're very deep, and on a lot of boards that contain a deuce, Bong Bob will have some sort of ace deuce, or at least sometimes will have some sort of ace deuce that got that leaves him with just a pair. So you're going to have good draws, and it's a nice hand to have in your range. So I would continue. I would just flat call here.
If we wanted to advise people who are new to this game to kind of try to stay out of trouble, do you think this is an okay hand to fold for that reason, or do you think you're just giving up too much?
It's okay. It's okay, especially because you're suited to the jack and not to the ace. If you're suited to the ace, then you're really going to hit a lot of good flops with this hand.
Yeah, I think I would have played it if I had been suited.
Yeah, but when you think about it, can you show the hand again on the screen? One nice thing is that so first you make the nuts, and second you also cover a lot of boards, and that's a nice combination to have. When you think about it, you're not going to completely whiff a lot of the time, so you'll be able to call one bet profitably with a lot of the hand on really a lot of boards. Sometimes the price you pay for that is that it's hard to make the nuts, but the Ace Jack 10 gives you a shot at a lot of nut straights. So you've got really a lot of good playability with this hand. I would probably continue here in some form. And I want to emphasize that's largely because we're playing very deep and because we have the position against the aggressor here. But if you're not real confident in your post flop skills, yeah, go ahead and fold. That's just fine.
Okay. So how would you proceed on a flop like this? Right, our hand being Ace Jack 10-3 with non-nut clubs, you end up getting middle pair, gut shot, backdoor low, backdoor clubs. If we had called here and Bob bets a similar fraction of the pot, you're appealing?
Absolutely. So in a three-way pot, I would probably just call. I think the call looks pretty scary. I think if Nami can't do too much to you, and taking this turn in position is going to be great. A king is a bad card for us, and that's about it. I mean, a 10 is a good card. A jack isn't great, but how many of Bong Bob's hands, he's going to have a lot of aces in his range, and even two pairs can't feel great. So almost every turn card either gives us the nuts, a nut draw, some other strong but more marginal-ish made hand, or good bluffing opportunity. So I think this is a case where you use the playability of your hand and just call a bet, looking to apply pressure later.
I would say a 3 would be a bad card as well,
Yeah.
because it would eliminate our low potential without giving us additional high potential, really. I mean, we'd have a bad two pair, but I don't think it's really a hand we could continue with. An ace is in some ways bad for the same reason, but it would also give us a much stronger two pair. So I would feel better about getting an ace than about getting a 3. I think a 3 is another card that
although an ace, like 3 betting ranges will often have better than ace 10 on an ace king 10 board. So yeah, you might be ahead a little more often right now with the 10-3, but it's going to cause other problems for you. So yeah.
So yeah, he does end up having aces, so an ace would not have been a good card, but we would have made the nut low. So a good example of why peeling with a backdoor nut low. It's not often you need more than just that to peel, but given the number of draws we had, you can see the backdoor nut low definitely.
Well, and also there's a good chance we can fold out that hand by the river, like with ace 4-6 on the board with a 4. He's got an ace 6 low in one pair. That's a world of pain. I would certainly bet the turn and be happy to call a raise, and then once he calls, then when we make nuts on the river, pot it in his face and see how he likes it.
Yeah, that's a great example actually. Let's go back and look at the at the river situation we would be in if we were heads up with Bong Bob, because this is an important point. I mean, there will probably be a time in the video where I have a chance to do this, but so we're holding Ace King Jack 3. If we imagine we peel the turn and Avnomia is out of there, Bong Bob checks. We're going to want to bet the turn now with nut low potential. The backdoor flush also has the potential to get there, and a nut flush is going to be more valuable when it comes in the backdoor than when it comes in the front. But regardless, it's this is a very good. This is like one of the best possible turn cards for us, short of a queen giving us the nut high. So this we really pick up a lot on this turn card. So we definitely want to bet now as sort of a semi bluff to put a lot of pressure on Bob. And then even if he does check call with his pair of aces and an ace-7 low, right now we've rivered the nut low, and if it just went check on the river, we would only get half the pot. But this is a very safe time for us to just bet the pot on the river. Once Bong Bob is checked, it's pretty unlikely that he has the nut low himself. He's more likely to be check calling with some kind of, like the kind of hand that he has, like something with weak high potential and some kind of low potential. The 8 doesn't really complete any draws for him. So I think we can pretty safely bet the river. Like the worst case scenario really is, I mean, I guess the worst case scenario would be him check raising, but realistically, the worst case scenario is that like he checks and calls and we only get 1/4 of the pot because he has something like ace 3 X. But a lot of the time, what's going to happen instead is when we bet the pot, he's going to be holding aces for high and ace-7 for the low, and he could pretty easily get scooped in this situation. And does he want to call a pot size bet when he could easily be scooped? And we might end up scooping the pot, even though we really only had half the pot locked up, by making what I think I've heard some other people call a demi bluff, meaning you're betting and you're confident you're going to get at least 1/4 of the pot, probably half of the pot, even if you're called. And there's a real chance that you can cause somebody to fold out half of the pot.
Yeah, and I also want to say that this hand illustrates that you do get to showdown without paying through the nose for it sometimes. Like if we hit a great board here, but even if we hadn't hit such a good board, if we're just stuck with a second nut low or a mediocre two-way hand, this pot did not get huge, and it's not like Bong Bob can go crazy and pressure you at exactly the right moments from out of position. The possibility of demi bluffing really keeps people in line out of position more often, especially this deep.
So those guys end up chopping it. King Deuce 9-3. This time I went for limp and a call.
Yeah.
Seem okay?
I would certainly limp against a good player. I would just limp fold. The Deuce 3 has some value. The King Deuce suited has some value, but you have a very poor. I mean, imagine you're playing pot limit Omaha high, and you have King 9-3 Deuce out of position. That's garbage. And then. Right. You're playing a split pot game.
You're really adding to it.
Yeah, you're playing a split pot game, and you have one combination for low that's easily counterfeited. I think limp fold is a good plan with this hand.
Interesting. Okay. So I ended up in a good example. I'm not going to get a lot of like great flops, and this certainly is not a good one for me. So I suppose I could have saved myself 60 chips there. You can holler at me if you see.
Yeah. Can you go back? It's partly because
didn't take long for me to get hollered at.
Yeah, well, no. It's just a small thing. The King Queen 9-6. It's not a good hand. It's a one-way hand, but I do think it's fine to 3-bet against a screen name that I recognize from 2+2. Somebody who's not gonna just shrivel up into a corner when I 3-bet him. I probably wouldn't do that, and this is definitely like a loose and light 3-bet. But this deep with a hand with some nut potential, I think it's worth considering using the button with a hand like this. It's not good, but it might be good enough to play for me sometimes. I do mess around with hands like this, and my results doing so are just fine. But it's a loose play, and I wouldn't advocate it as a standard play or a play for a new player.
Yeah, I will say I really have not done a lot of kind of like light 3-betting per se. I guess I probably just don't do a lot of 3-betting in general, which I don't know how big of a mistake you consider that to be.
Yeah, I mean, I knew a guy who folded Ace Jack 10-3 single suited to a 3-bet, so I think it has some good effects if you 3-bet. I think react pretty nicely to that. So I think this deep position is just so good. And sometimes that means that three betting is bad because you're reducing the SPR. But this deep, you can have like a nice big SPR even if you three bet, and it's just a great way to use your position, much as it is in Hold'em. I three bet much more than my opponents do, and I'm happy with that. I think that's a way I make reciprocal money.
Okay. Would you play this and just a limp to you?
Yes, because I like to take flops in position. It's mediocre, but you'll make the nuts sometimes. You'll make a flush sometimes. You'll make a bad low sometimes. It's hard to get into too much trouble calling 20 chips. It's marginal. It's marginal, but it's a call for me. And then I would fold to this raise. So way to save 20 chips.
And this is a flop where I think you could kind of get into some trouble where all you really have is a gut shot that's not to the nuts.
Yeah. It's, well, I mean, I don't think you should continue in a multi-way pot on this flop, but
yeah, and you've got a non-nut low draw as well.
Yeah, but whoa. Can you put that up again? I think Kenyo made a nice raise here in position. I see people limp behind a lot with this hand, but although you don't want to overvalue the elements of Kenyo's hand here, I do think that this deep he did well to build a pot when he's got some nut potential and also some nut potential. He's going to make some low straights sometimes. He's going to make some flushes sometimes. He's going to make good lows with a flush sometimes. I see a lot of people limping this behind, and I think if you're confident in your post-flop skills, this is a great spot to build the pot. You can call a 3-bet this deep just fine, and it's a good way to sort of smooth out your range, hit some boards hard that you wouldn't otherwise hit hard. So I give Kenyo full marks for the raise here.
One thing that's neat about this hand, and obviously it's not a situation that's going to come up that often, but if you get a board like Ace 3-5, and someone else who has Deuce 4 is going to feel pretty excited about their hand, and you have a lot of equity actually against other Deuce 4s. So for one thing, you even if nothing changes about the board, you end up getting 3/4 because you have a higher straight on that board. So someone is thinking that he's got a wheel and he wants to play a huge pot with it, and in fact he ends up getting quartered, which getting quartered for a 250 big blind stack hurts. And then on top of that, you often are going to have some kind of flush or backdoor flush potential. If a deuce or a 4 comes and the hand gets counterfeited, you're still going to have a low and a high. So there's at least a couple of situations you can get into that, although they're somewhat low probability, they're extremely profitable in the sense that you're going to be free rolling your opponent in a spot where quite often those free rolls are going to pay off. It's not like straight versus straight plus flush and Hold'em on the turn where that flush doesn't come in that often on the river. Like if you get it in with a hand like this against somebody who's got the same low without redraws, that's going to be a very profitable spot for you.
Yeah. So just for listeners' edification, our hand 7-6-4 deuce double suited is roughly a 58-42 underdog against a 7-6-5 single suited to the 7. In a sense, that's bad luck because his hand dominates ours in some respects. That said, we've got a lot of playability, and we're going to do well in position. One very coarse rule of thumb is that when you need hot and cold equity, if you have an ace, your hand is probably better than you think it is, and if you don't, it's probably not as good as you think it is. So, you really are losing something hot and cold immediately, but this hand has good playability. I think it's a good hand to put into a raising range. But, I think some people might be surprised that it's that much of an underdog to a hand like ace 7-6-5. Oh no!
I thought I was going to peel there. I'm pretty surprised. I really didn't think I was going to fold that. Yeah. I can see why folding this is best.
Yeah, fold. Yeah, 3-bet sometimes. Fold. Yeah, I mean, not as a standard play, but to smooth out a range. And then I would certainly calling's the play there, I think.
How would you proceed on a board like this?
Check and fold the heavy action. It's just one pair, and
no, it's 2 pair. Queens and deuces.
Queens and deuces. Eesh.
That's a gut shot.
Yeah. So you have to call one bet, I think, but I wouldn't inflate the pot, and I would look to fold on the turn to any kind of heavy action.
I tend to think about this sort of spot as kind of like drawing to a safe turn, of which there are not that many.
Yeah.
Like any diamond is bad for you, any low card is bad for you. Yeah, so and you're kind of hoping for like, I mean, a queen, a deuce, or a 10 would be ideal. Other than that, you're sort of hoping for a blank, of which there are really not very many at all. Like anything ace through 8, except for a deuce, is bad for you. Nines and jacks are actually not that good for you. Kings and aces, king is okay, ace is bad for you. So yeah, there really are not a lot of good turn cards. So you're kind of drawing to a small number of safe turns.
Yeah.
And even the 10 of diamonds is not good.
Yeah.
Oh, we would have got it though. Okay, these are some of the worst hands. If you've got like 3 sevens.
Yeah. No, it's very bad. Just fold straight off, I think.
Yeah, I did. So even though you've got a suited connector in there and 2 low cards, wildly unplayable hand.
Yep.
Most of the value in holding a pair of sevens is in making a set of sevens, and obviously that's not going to happen very much when you're holding one of those sevens in your hand. I assume you're going to tell me I made a mistake not raising this.
I actually like limping behind. I think, yeah, it's close. It's close. You are gonna, yeah. I think limping and raising are both good. If you think raising will get you the button, sometimes I think that's great. Yeah, it's. Yeah, you've only got two wheel cards here, so it's I think a little bit weaker than some other low cards. As long as you don't fold, you're not making a big mistake. I would probably raise though.
At least I didn't choose the worst option.
Yeah.
Any sense in continuing?
Well, you're gonna hit some, spades, fours. I mean, spades are not great turns for you, but they give you a little value. Threes, fours, and fives give you a little value. I would fold here, but it's less terrible than it might appear, but it's pretty bad. So
I think if we want to advise people to kind of stay out of
please,
trouble, I think
please
fold. There's really and the main way to see this is that there are no like slam dunk nutty turns for you. A 3 is pretty good, but it's not. It's definitely possible that someone else out there is playing like ace 3 or something. But a 3 is pretty good, but you can't turn the nut low. You can't turn any particularly strong high hand. Mostly you'd be looking to turn draws, and they're draws to non-nut hands. So it's not really the sort of thing you want to be in there chasing unless you really know what you're doing.
Yep. No, I would, just to be clear, I would fold. That's.
Mistake not to 3-bet?
Goes either way. This deep 3-betting is rough. This deep, one important feature of a 3-betting hand is that it have nut potential. So, and that's something that this hand does have. That said, also this deep, I'm much happier just calling. So I would call.
Part of me too is thinking like a tournament, I might have a little more interest in like a small ball sort of approach. Not that I necessarily expect to have a big edge in this tournament, but I enjoy playing it, so I kind of value my survival for that reason. Interesting flop, I would say actually not very good. It might initially seem good, like, oh, we've got top pair and we've got a gut shot and we've got backdoor spades, but we've got no potential for making a low really, and the high is. It's going to be hard for us to do. Even like, I mean, I guess a queen or a 10 are pretty good cards, but I mean, they're far from the nuts. So I think I just checked and folded.
Yeah, I would peel here because I guess one thing that's coming out is I like to continue with my hands sometimes. I think one thing that's important is that you can represent some hands on this board, at least as part of your range. So your live 5 is going to be good sometimes. My standard here is to call once and then fold the turn if I'm unimproved, but the queen does help, the 10 does help. Your aces might be good from the button, and I think people aren't going to barrel you too much with worse. Moreover, a lot of hands with like 3-5, 3-6 in them are just folded before the flop, and some of those are also defended from the big blind. So I think that some of the boards that will be scary for you will also be scary for him, and so I would call this a pot odds call, and a peel once sort of hand.
Okay. I made a try to stay out of trouble fold.
Sounds good.
Bad fold?
Yeah, against I think it's a good standard fold. It's a good stay out of trouble fold too. Yeah, a hand like this is a good way uh, to get into trouble, to make a bad two pair, bad low hands like that. You're gonna have to fold equity a lot of the time. I would
You want to play the kings?
the double suited kings with a low potential. I would open.
Okay. So even though it's sort of, well, not sort of, it's pretty weak low potential.
Yeah. You've got some high between making a set of kings, making a king high flush, making a straight with the 4-6. You've got some high potential. It covers boards that are usually bad for an under the gun raiser, and some of the boards that are bad for you give you an emergency low. Moreover, some people are going to be inclined to take free cards against you, given that you raised from first position. Again, some of the boards that'll be scary for you will be scary for the other guy too, and sometimes. So think back to the hand where you folded Ace Jack 10-3 out of the big blind, and we saw the King 10x board, and we said, "Aha! There is a board where you can fight against a pre-flop raiser." I'm not the only one who thinks that, and so when you do hit your set of kings, it'll have good value sometimes. So I would play this hand.
I will emphasize, though, and I hope people are paying attention to the features of this hand that Nate is saying makes it playable. Having some kind of low to go along with the kings, the fact that the kings are double suited, a hand like King 9-5, even double suited, I would say not playable.
I would fold except against the weakest opponents.
So I think kind of a common mistake that people who are new to, even in Omaha, I think overvaluing kings ends up being a mistake in Omaha high, but especially in Omaha high low, the like pocket pairs. As a Hold'em player, you get excited when you see pocket pairs, but they really don't have that much value in this game. Kind of mostly here, you're going to be trying to make like a set or a flush. So once you take out that flush potential, and if you also lose low potential, so that all you can really make is a set, there's just not nearly as much value in trying to set mine in a split pot game or in an Omaha game as there is in Hold'em.
Yeah.
And unimproved kings is not that strong of a hand in the way that it's kind of a monster in Hold'em.
Hey, good raise. Two-way hand, nut potential.
And I flopped not quite the nuts, but obviously a very strong high and no low. And this strikes me as the kind of situation where even though I don't quite have the nut high, blind battle, it's pretty likely that my flush is good, and I would like to put some pressure on my opponent because he could have a lot of non-nut lows that don't have any high potential, and I want to try to blow him off of those.
Yeah, that's right. He will have. Excuse me. If you face heavy pressure, you don't like it because Jack high flush will not be good for high, but he'll have a low sometimes, and he will have, as you said, a lot of hand like a lot. You've got a live 5. If another low card comes, he'll have a live 4 or 3, or he'll have a hand like like 8-3 now that you would like him to fold. So I would certainly start betting and keep betting until you have a reason not to.
I probably would have folded to a check raise.
Yeah. I would probably peel against a check raise and then fold to too much more action because, the naked low will check raise you sometimes. But yeah, I certainly I like your plan of taking the lead and then getting worried if you face too much resistance.
So the more diamonds you have, the less good your hand is.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a very good hand to begin with, but blocking your own flush is not helpful.
Nah, and a lot of the straights you make will be non-nut or half pot straights.
So all that Jack 8-9, all those middle cards are not very valuable.
Yeah.
You saw me fold a Jack 8-9-3. This one has a lot of nut potential.
Yeah.
Even it's a little unfortunate to be blocking my own diamonds, but certainly if I'm getting to see the flop for free.
Yeah. In the ace king, that doesn't give you that much nut potential, but it does give you, good pair, good two pair potential.
It's a
That
great
helps.
example on this board. I've kind of got, I don't have real nutty hands either way, but, I do have hands that have real potential to win the pot both ways. One important thing to point out about lows is that as much as it is important to draw the nut lows, you have a better chance of winning the pot with a non-nut low when there's an ace or a deuce on the board, because ace deuce is by far the low combination that people play the most. So it's far more likely that 6-3 is going to play for the low on a board like this than that 6-3 is going to play for the low on a board like 4-7-8.
Yep.
So would you bet here, or do you see this as more of a check call sort of hand?
Yeah, I would check call. I would check a lot of my hands here and inflating the pot deep with a marginal high, marginal low hand. Even though it's a good situation, the ace king has value, the 6-3 has value. It has a lot less value once the bet goes in, and then once he raises you, you're in a sticky spot. So I would check call.
Yeah, I think of this as like a small pot hand. There's a good chance that my high and or my low will be good as long as the pot stays small. But as the pot gets big, my opponent's range gets stronger, which makes it less likely that either of my hands is best. And even if one of them is best, as the pot gets larger, he's going to be putting more pressure on me. Even if he just has the nut low, I'm not going to be able to take a lot of pressure with his hand. So he can end up, if the pot gets big, he can end up taking advantage of that to put a lot of pressure on my ace king and force me off of the high. So I'm really not trying to blow up the pot yet. Now that I turn top two and also see him check on the flop, indicating to me that he probably does not have a real strong high or a real strong low, now it seems to me I probably just want to bet, and I would guess that I potted it.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly given that a bet didn't go in.
And I ended up just potting it again on the river. I really don't think that he has a real nut low. I think that he would have bet the flop if he had like 2-3 or 2-4, or probably even 3-4. So I think that it's unlikely that I'm going to get scooped, even if this pop bet is called. So I think I can possibly fold him off of half and possibly get called and win 3/4 or more.
Yeah, I think that's right. The Broadway combinations, Broadway straights are out there more often than a Hold'em player might think, but the Queen Jack combination is not very common from one off the cutoff. So I think you can feel good about your high hand, especially given how little resistance you've gotten so far, and given that he called the turn, which he might not have done with Queen Jack, even if he had it in the first place. And your low has some value. You can get hands that have half the pot to fold, and you can definitely get called and then scoop. So this is very good.
Yeah, and this is kind of a common mistake that people make in this game is playing too passively on the river, or just in general, I guess, which we've seen some of that from me as well. But I am aware that it's a common mistake because you get told all this, you wait for the nuts, you got to have the nuts, but at the same time, your opponent is kind of doing the same thing. And so when you do have a hand that is very difficult to scoop, like this hand is, it takes really a specific combination of cards to scoop me here. Like he has to have 3 or 4 cards exactly. Really, I think 4 cards exactly to scoop me. Like he's got to have 2 low cards better than my 6-3, plus he has to have 2 high cards better than my ace king, whether that's a set or whether it's Queen Jack. Like he has to have all 4 cards right in order for me not to get away with half of the pot here. So I think it's a pretty safe spot for me to pot it and not really have to worry too much about the fact that I don't have the nuts in either direction because of how difficult it is for me to lose both ways. And as we were saying, one of the ways to scoop is to make your opponent fold half.
Yep.
Which he did, or he folded. Whether or not he had half, we don't know. We're coming up on an hour here, so let's go ahead and stop part 1, and we will be back with more PLO8 action in part 2. Thanks for watching. Hope you found that enjoyable. Hope you found it helpful. Again, encourage you to contribute. You can do that either at the CrowdRise page here or by clicking the donate link either here in this video, or you can go to www.baudl.org. You can donate by credit card, PayPal. There's information about mailing a check. Whatever you think this video was worth to you, it will go to a good cause, and I will appreciate it. thanks for watching, and part 2 will be out shortly if it's not out already.